welcome back to another video. I'm back with another speed paint of a fairy again, and this one is called the Garden Fairy. It's a painting I've done several times throughout the years. I redo it as I get a little bit better, and I think it turned out pretty good this time. So you let me know what you think, and I will leave links for my Instagram and the website down below. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, starting out with another sketch ready, and I have a color palette already chosen ahead of time, so I selected my colors and created a little palette in the color section in Procreate, and it's going to be mostly cooler tones. It's going to stay mostly cooler tones. I don't change the palette too much by the end, but as always I do end up adjusting curves and color layers in the end. So I'm just starting off with the base colors, the flat colors, and just filling that in, and then quickly getting an idea for the background. So just getting all the elements in place, and then once I have all the colors for the fairy laid out as well as the colors for the background, then I can go in and do the rendering. So right now I'm zooming out so you can see from a thumbnail what the overall composition is going to look like, and I kind of flip the background back and forth to see if I want the light on the fairy or if I want more of a contrast. So I could go with the dark background next to the lighter skin, and that's one way to make it pop. Or you can flip it and have the lighter area drawing attention to where you want the main focus to be, which is by her face, which is what I end up doing. So right now I'm testing out a lighting scenario with the light on the right side and coming and illuminating her from behind. And so the way I'm doing this is setting a multiply layer and painting in the shadows, and the multiply layer has a light purple color. And then I save that version as a JPEG just to kind of go back and look at later. And I thought it would be interesting to save some progress shots of this painting. And then as you can see, I flipped the background around and I end up sticking with this arrangement. So now she's being illuminated from the front. And I paint in the highlights on her skin using an overlay layer, and then once I get all those colors blocked in, then I start in with the rendering. So I got rid of the line art layer, the sketch layer, but I kind of spent a long time messing around with this face and trying to get the perspective right. I think it would have worked out better if I had just merged the line art layer with the underpainting and then rendered over that, which is what I sometimes do, but I didn't do it this time because, you know, I'm always trying new processes, and I thought maybe it would be better not to have to paint over the lines and, you know, paint away or blend away those lines, but I think it would have actually sped up my painting process because then I already have the details figured out. And so instead, I'm having to figure out the details again here. So you can see I'm using the liquify tool quite a bit. And I end up playing around with the proportions on her body. I end up making her a little bit less tall, like shorter features. Not too much, but like subtly, that you can kind of tell by the end. And just trying to get that gaze right, so you can see I'm comparing her to the original sketch. And I drew those lines there in a separate layer so I can have the perspective lines mapped out. I have a tendency of moving the eyes either too high or too low and making it look like her head's tilted, so there's those lines and I'm just trying to get those lined up. And so she's reaching for a flower in front of her, which I haven't yet painted it in yet. So I decided to do away with the pupils and add those in later so I can figure out her gaze and just work on rendering the rest of the details. So now I'm doing the hair, and hair is very enjoyable to paint. I just kind of imagine it like ribbons flowing ribbons and then just render it like that. And I took some reference for the hands, some reference photos, and just trying to get it to look realistic enough. Hands are interesting because you don't want to over-render them to just make them not match the level of detail of the rest of the figure. It's kind of that balance I'm trying to figure out of simplified but semi-realistic, which is kind of the style I'm going for. I believe I retook some reference shots so that I could get that bottom hand placed right. So I'm trying to get it looking like it's coming out at you a little bit, so you shorten the arm there before shortening. I didn't think I got the effect just right, so I moved it back down later. Yeah, you can see this is one of those paintings I had to redo elements over and over again, mostly just the eye area and that hand. The dress is fairly simple. So it's mostly a top-down lighting, kind of a soft lighting. And there's going to be a stronger light coming from behind her, which will paint in a rim light. So I like this lighting scenario lately, where I'm doing more of an overcast lighting, and then a rim lighting to make things pop. Sometimes I notice I get way too complicated of light scenarios set up for myself, and then I'm just trying to figure out like several different light sources that are affecting each other and creating weird cast shadows. And you know, if I'm painting as many paintings as I'm doing in the period of time I'm trying to do, I need to not overcomplicate every little part of the painting process. So a simpler lighting scenario is something I'm trying to do lately. So now I'm painting in the wings, and I'm keeping it pretty simple. Simple wing design with just some fun line shapes. But not too many colors going on with the wings. This is one of those steps, looking back, I could have made easier if I had turned up the streamline effect on my brush settings. So if you're not familiar with Procreate, then there's a setting where you can turn up streamline, which just kind of smooths out your lines for you. So if you have like a shaky line, then that will make it look a lot straighter or just smoother angles and curves, which I did not do for those lines, and so I ended up having to go back over them several times to clean up the edges. And that would have made things much simpler. So I like doing these paintovers because I'm learning as I record and look back just certain things that would have made it easier for me. And I'm all about making it easier. Sometimes I tend to get overwhelmed with the task before me, and so if I can just find ways to make my life easier, and that is always great. So I placed in her pupils, and I think she's looking right at the right target. Depending on how far away the object is, you want the pupils to be looking closer to each other, so it looks like they're looking at the same thing. And then of course having to figure out how they set on a round eyeball, something I'm still kind of working on. And being a former makeup artist, it's kind of a temptation to really doll up all of these female figures with lots of pretty makeup, but I keep it mostly pretty simple, at least for this lady. every once in a while I get a figure where I get to make her pretty made up, and that is always a treat for me. So you can see her overall proportions are shorter. This is actually closer to my own proportions, and since I'm taking the reference photos using myself, this was a bit easier for me to figure out. But also just because I kept shrinking certain parts of the body, and so I tend to have a habit of making the head really big, so I just shrunk down the head, and then, you know, just led to overall shrinking of the figure. So I adjusted the curves of the background a little bit after rendering it out, and I forgot to mention that I did 2 layers for the background. One layer where I blurred it with the Gaussian blur a little bit, and then the second layer where the objects are closer. And then I did the rim light on the character coming from behind her. So the rim light's a cooler color, and the soft light illuminating her from the top down is also a cooler color, so not a lot of warm colors in this one. And I end up adjusting the curves layer and the color layer. So I turn the shadows towards cyan a little bit and the highlights towards cyan, and I also do the midtones a little bit more towards magenta and up the contrast a little bit. And that's it for this piece. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.